There we go.
Okay. Okay. Do you wanna? Is your thing charging? Yes. All right.
Is your thing charging? Okay. It's always like that. All right. Let me post one.
Oh, testing, 1, 2, 3. Mo on the mic. You didn't like that? I could even spit out a Biggie verse, but I won't do it. I won't do it. I'm assuming you hear me. Testing. Yeah? Okay.
You're so funny.
Oh, I guess I don't need this because your thing is already charging.
Hey, what's up, beautiful people? We're just getting situated. We're gonna get started in 30 seconds. In the next 30 seconds, Mo's gonna bust out a big runner for us.
I won't do it to y'all, not this time. We'll do it on talent night.
When is talent night?
We haven't decided yet. I just thought of it. But maybe we could show our talents.
Excellent.
Yeah, that works?
Yes, that does work. So it's 8 o'clock, so let's get kicked off.
Yes.
I'm gonna let you introduce yourself, Mo.
Hello, everyone. This is Maureen Murat. I am with Crowdy Advisors. I am an attorney, and I am with Crowdy Advisors. However, I consult small businesses about strategy and operations, and as well and fundraising as well. So in terms of if you're trying to raise money to grow your business, we look at whether equity crowdfunding or other alternative types of resources are available for what you're trying to do. And you?
My name is Samson Williams, at Hustle Fun Baby on Twitter and Instagram. I'm here to bother Maureen and ask her a bunch of Twitter Esquire type questions about ICOs, blockchain, and what's happening in the cryptocurrency space. So what's our topic for this evening?
So our topic for this evening, and it's not going to be an interview, it's going to be a conversation, just to clarify that. Our topic for this evening is after the raise, so post-ICO issues, what entrepreneurs and startups should be thinking about after they raise, their millions of dollars. And I know we have some stats here, but at the end of this, we want you to be able to be thinking that after you raise your money, you actually have to start running a business. That is the takeaway. If you take nothing else away, that the ICO, even though it takes a lot of time and energy and money, that is not the end all. That's just the beginning.
So
Would you agree?
So you're saying an ICO is not a business?
Yes, an ICO is not a business.
I'm her emotional translator.
Yes. So what would you say about that?
One of the comments when we posted that we were going to do something was that we're putting the cart before the horse, meaning a couple of disclaimers. 98% of ICOs are going to fail. So already from 2017, we're right around 78%.
Right.
To date, the rest will fail over the course of the next 9 to 12 months. It's just because being a startup is difficult. See, I didn't even curse that time.
Right. Appreciate it.
Being a startup is very difficult. So there will be 2% of people who are successful in the ICO phase, meaning they did some really good marketing, some advertising, and they got people to invest in their dream. One of the most interesting facts is that from 2017 to today, no one has actually invested in a product. They've all invested in a dream. So big shout out to all the marketers out there who are crushing it, getting people to invest in dreams. I love it. It's like $13 billion invested in dreams. Those are some mean PowerPoints.
Well, yes, and those are some mean PowerPoints and white papers, right? So in terms of putting the cart before the horse, I mean, don't you think that the issue with the ICOs is that because they're selling a dream, there's not a lot of work being put into the product because they're waiting on raising the funds?
Well, yeah, that's part of selling the dreams. Doing an ICO is very similar to building a house. So you start off with a set of plans. Rather, let me phrase, you go find an architect to design you a set of plans, to draw you a set of plans. Then you go find a contractor to actually build the house. And so most people, they get stuck at the find the architect phase because they don't know who to talk to. to help them along this journey, because they're not thinking about, oh, I'm going to start a business. They're thinking, oh, I'm going to raise a bunch of money, but raising money is a business in itself. And then there's that business that comes after the business, which is the business of your business.
Okay, so I think people are not raising money just to raise money. I think, well, I won't make that a blanket statement, because we know that there are people who raise money just for the sake of it. But I think what we should be thinking about is people who are raising the funds because they actually want to build something. So I still think they're not thinking of it as a business, but they're thinking it more so as a project. And at some point it has to get out of the project phase, right? And actually be something that you can sell, that you can use, that you can market. And I know that we were at something last week where someone asked, at what point do you stop talking about how great your idea is? Did I steal your notes? Sorry. At what point do you stop talking about what your great idea is and you actually create it and or start selling that thing? So do you have an idea of, let's say, what a time frame would be? Like you close on June 1st. When should you start
marketing,
acting like you are a business?
Let's pretend we're EOS.
Okay. Yes.
Right.
We're just pretending.
We're just pretending.
Okay.
I think they raised, how much in the billions did they raise?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's like 4.
Like 4 billion.
Like 4 billion. So for $4 billion, they have a really nice website. They updated about a month and a half ago. It's a fabulous $2 billion website. They launched and they crashed 6 hours later.
Immediately, yes.
And since then, I haven't actually seen anything come out of EOS in terms of a product. And so that can be a challenge where you've raised a ton of money. Lots of people are depending on you because they're going to build on top of your platform,
right,
the EOS platform, but they have nothing to show for it. Granted, it's been about 30 days, or a little less than 30 days, but they're scrambling with their crisis communications, trying to figure out how do you communicate to your stakeholders? Because one of the things that happens once you are successful in raising your funds, congratulations, you have an entire community to manage.
Right.
And you don't have an entire community of shareholders or stakeholders. You have an entire community of folks on Telegram, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Slack channel who want to know, why aren't you doing anything?
Well, yes, that's the question. And I'll just to say that we're just using EOS as an example, right? And because there are more examples. I sent you something the other day about the Boston College doing that study that found that I think it was 56% of crypto startups die within 4 months. So what do you think, aside from not building something, causes them to die? One thing, I'll start with one. I think one thing is the mismanagement of that amount of money. I think people, when you are collecting that amount of money, that could be a challenge because one, you're not even collecting it in cash, right? It's being collected in, or you're collecting it in another type of cryptocurrency, probably Ether or Bitcoin or something like that, right? And so that makes it difficult because you have to exchange it into fiat, even though I hate that word, we'll say, and then that becomes a challenge too because you can't necessarily live off of Bitcoins right now. That's not. Well, what's another reason you think they die that quickly? If
we take a step back and we just look at the human element, most founders, they're founding a business. And so we might be in the decentralized space, but until people, there's an educational curve to learning how to work with people in a decentralized fashion.
Right.
We can't even get people to work out of office in a decentralized fashion. So how are you holding these people accountable? How do you keep them on task and on target? And most founders, this is the first time they're launching an entrepreneurial endeavor, and so all of a sudden they have some money and then they have people to manage. And just because you're a brilliant technologist does not mean you interact well with humans. Humans have a way of getting under each other's skin. Just ask Maureen. I do it to her all the time. Okay. And so that's probably the biggest impediment is the pay scales and egos, because everybody's a unique snowflake. They have a first one of its kind revolutionary project, and they need to communicate and articulate this to other people on their team. And so in doing that, there's different visions and there's different implementation strategies. And so that's what causes most of teams, in my opinion, to crumble is poor communications amongst the founding team. Because, my ego is my ego, and you should read between the lines.
Okay. So earlier we talked about ICOs not being a business, right? But they treat ICOs as a business because you end up getting legal, you get marketing, you get a business development person possibly to help you get the ICO out. And then once it's out and you raise the funds, there's this perception that you don't necessarily need those same people anymore. And I disagree. I think because you're running a business, you still need marketing, you still need the business development person, you still need the strategist, depending on what you're creating. You still need an attorney because you probably need some sort of maybe contracts with people that you are trying to collaborate with. Maybe you have licenses that you need, maybe because you're in healthcare, so there are some regulations that you have to comply with, etc. What other things do you think someone would need when starting a business, right? Because at the end of the day, this is a business starting up.
Yeah. There are all the administrative things I was just thinking about. Your 1099, your W-2s, all that boring HR stuff, human resources stuff.
That's a good one.
But before we get to that point, we take a step back and just think about the technology. When you're developing your first of its kind snowflake, you don't know how it works. No one else knows how it works. There's no other examples really that you can say, hey, look how they did it. Their product works. Let's follow that template. And so that's not there. When you're building your flux capacitor for your Star Trek Enterprise and you're going to time travel at light speed, there's lots of technical issues that are going to arise. And so most people aren't ready to tackle those technical issues because, again, they're difficult, they're frustrating. And so that's actually probably what stops most businesses. And it goes back to the pay scales and the egos, because I have a solution to address this problem, you have a solution to address a technical solution, and then we need to battle it out to reach that infamous consensus. So even before we get to the HR, the employee contracts, the W-2s, the 1099s, how you convert cryptos to pay your rent, and all those other things we're talking about, there's just some technological issues that arise.
And I'll just do an aside for the tech stuff, because I know that you like to say, does anybody care about how your cell phone works? And nobody does because it works, so long as it works, right? And I think right now people are very interested in how the technology works for whatever is being deployed. But I think that another issue that might hold some companies back is being able to explain what it is they're actually selling or providing, because when you first started selling it, right, it was an idea and it was a great idea and it looked great on paper, but when it comes time to implement it and it's time to actually put it out into the market, you still need those adopters or those evangelists, as you would call them, to support whatever it is that you're trying to create. I mean, the other thing I would say is that oftentimes people who are buying these cryptos, right, saying they're trying to help you build whatever it is you're trying to build, I think you should go forward as though they're not going to use them, right? They're not going to be your investors, the consumers of your tokens don't automatically mean that they're going to be your users. You know what I mean? So I think that's something to also keep in mind. You shook your head. You wanted to say something?
Why are you beating up the table?
Oh, sorry. It's my ring. You know, I have heavy hands, so I can't help myself.
You're such a small person. You're so aggressive all the time.
Strong. That's what that is. I'm strong.
Yeah. So while Maureen's being strong, part of it is there's some education that needs to happen on the consumer side. Because again, you're developing your first one of its kind snowflake. How do you use it? And so at one point, this pen was revolutionary, right? You go like this, that little thing. But the pocket had to be invented first, so you can actually stick it on there. And so for your first of its kind thing, how do you explain it to people? And not from the technical sense, but explain it from the sense of it makes something easier, faster, better, cheaper, and it's super convenient. And so one of my questions is, for iPhones, why do they even come with directions? Because they literally only have one button on them. And they're pretty intuitive. And so if your bit of technology or whatever you're developing isn't as intuitive as an iPhone, meaning it's got one button and even an idiot like myself can use it almost flawlessly, then you should need to rethink your whole product design. And that's another thing that can stop you dead in your tracks is your product design, and the culture. I heard a piece where you need to learn to speak the culture, particularly if you're going to go into an emerging market because you've got a remittance, a healthcare app or something that you're trying to.
Renewable energy type of project.
So you're trying to roll that out into an emerging market, but do you speak the language of the people, and then do you speak the culture? Because I've seen people, they show up, hey, what's up, colonizer? And then everything goes downhill very quickly.
Okay. Did not know he was going to say that, y'all. But okay. But speaking of technical issues, I think one thing that maybe they should add to the team, aside from marketing, et cetera, is someone who can audit their code, right? And the UX, UI designer. I think those are people that should be on the team for sure, especially because it's a tech product, a technology product. I think that that's definitely something to keep in your back pocket.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things also that you should have on your team is a storyteller, because again, it goes back to education. Your story needs to be easily digestible so that people get, oh, this is a story. I have an emotional attachment to this thing that I'm doing. So head, heart, feet. Head, they need to be aware of something. Heart, they need to feel some type of way about it, preferably happy or they like it. And feet is the action that they take. That goes back to your clear call to action to buy, sell, trade, or use your product. And of course, because this is an entrepreneur world, you should always be ready to pivot.
Oh, that's a good one. Yes, you should be ready to pivot. And I'll just tell a little background about myself, and I guess you could tell your story too. So when I first started Karate Advisors, my goal was to help folks. I thought it was going to be very simple. If you want to do equity crowdfunding via the Jobs Act, Title III of the Jobs Act, and you wanted to raise less than $1 million, I would help you with the documentation that you needed to submit to the SEC, and consult you along the way as you find a platform and a FINRA-approved platform to put your campaign on. And then I kept going to all of these different tech meetups and meeting startups and entrepreneurs, and they hadn't even done some of the basic stuff, right? They weren't even a bona fide business yet, so they hadn't registered their business, they don't have a tax ID number, things of that nature. So it was very simple, basic things. They had a team, but there was no agreement, but they've been friends since forever, and you still need that on paper, let me just tell you. But so I had to pivot, right? So that meant that I had to, in addition to getting people ready for equity crowdfunding, I also had to help. I felt like this corner of the market was something that I could actually bring value to get them ready to even go to raise money via equity crowdfunding or any other financial resources. Do you have a similar story about having to pivot?
Yeah, I pivot on a regular basis.
Okay.
It's the
That's
nature
the thing.
of the
All right,
game.
you got to do it. You got to be flexible. Yes.
Yes. Only because sometimes your customers also demand that you pivot. So if you're thinking, hey, I've developed this product and it does this one thing, but then the market says, no, we don't want that thing. Because you developed a solution to a problem that only existed in your head. In which case you should have the awareness to be like, oh, we need to pivot. Otherwise your project will fail and you've raised a lot of money, and then you're gonna burn it out. You're gonna burn through your runway, and then you're going to tell all your supporters in your communities, hey, we tried to do this thing. We didn't want to pivot. We have 10,000 people in our Telegram group, and they were telling us what we needed, but what the consumers were telling us is not what we did. So you should always be aware that, yes, you may have to pivot. It's completely fine and okay.
And I think that merits me reiterating that just because they're in your Telegram group and they bought those cryptos does not mean they're automatically going to be your users and customers. So you have to sell to the people who will buy whatever it is that you're selling.
So now that we're 20 minutes in,
oh yes, we're going to take questions.
10 minutes left. But can we talk about some of the juicy stuff, the gossipy stuff?
Like what?
I don't know, letters from the SEC, all the shade you get when you reach your funds. Because if they're still on the line, might as well talk about that.
Okay, so what would you want to...
Without saying names,
okay,
without disclosing some of the shady characters and whatnot, what is some of the shade that you can encounter once you've been successful in reaching your raise?
So I think one of the issues that have really gotten some of the startups caught up is over-promising. So you're saying that you're going to create this thing and it doesn't get done and there's no work being done on it and things like that because it turns out it's much harder than you thought it was going to be. And so when there's a difference between, or I should say there's a fine line between puffery, right, and fraud or misrepresentation, you can easily get onto the other side of the line when you're over-promising and saying things that aren't necessarily true because you think that's what people want to hear. And so the SEC is definitely paying attention to that. They're also paying attention to what you call whatever it is that you're doing. So if you say this was going on for a while, right? People would say, well, my thing is not a security, it is X. It's something else. They pay attention to that because if they determine that what it is that you're selling is an actual security, then that sounds like misrepresentation, right? That sounds like you're not being completely forthcoming. But then on the other side of it, you could almost call it whatever you wanted to call it, so long as it's acting, smelling, looking like a security, then you're back under their jurisdiction, right? Another regulatory authority that you might want to be thinking about is the IRS, right? The Department of Treasury. They are also paying attention to all these transactions that are going on and the back and forth. People are getting paid in crypto, so they have to exchange it. That's considered, income. Things like that you have to be aware of. We learned something new last week about the CFTC. If your token or crypto is not considered a security, but it might be considered a commodity or a future, then that is another set of regulations that you have to be aware of and comply with. What else should I add?
I was thinking about some of the shade where you raised a few $1 million and someone else with a very similar project raised like $30 and now they're trolling you.
I was not going to go there, but if you want to go there, sir, that is all on you. And I think that you've said enough, honestly. But I mean, it's up to you if you want to add.
It happens, doesn't it? This is after the raise, post ICO issue.
It does happen, and unfortunately, sometimes, when it comes to legal issues, if what you're doing probably could have been protected by, some sort of intellectual property rights, then you might have put yourself at a disadvantage because the USPTO cares about who got there first.
Mm-hmm. So is there anything you can do, because I'm trying not to curse too much, because people talk a lot of trash in the telegrams, in the groups, and so you see sometimes that in the libel and defamation world, people throw those terms around. Is there anything that you can do to mitigate that or respond to that?
I think to an extent, you could by being transparent with the people in your Telegram group, but on a more informal level, I guess I'd say, I think that when you're building something that is great and that is powerful, then you should be okay with having some haters. Like, I think that I don't know if having haters, I don't think having haters is a bad thing, right? I don't think having people who have some issue with what you're doing is necessarily a bad thing. If all they're doing is talking trash, how much does that really affect what you're doing, right? If you have a goal, you have a focus, then you get your stuff done.
Mm-hmm. Suppose one of your haters is one of your advisors.
Well, they're not an advisor anymore. You can be a hater and an advisor. And that's another thing. We didn't talk about that, but I guess that technically comes before the raise, right? Having the need for advisors and et cetera. I think having advisors is great if they're providing some sort of value. You don't necessarily want to have advisors on your site or say that you have these advisors just to have a photo there or just have a face. I think it's deceiving, and it doesn't give your project any value if the advisor doesn't actually do anything. Now, if your advisor, let me finish. If your advisor is giving you constructive criticism and then you're looking at that as hating, then maybe you need to do a reevaluation of what you're doing, because I think you should bring advisors on to be objective, right? Not to only say, oh, your thing is great, let's just keep it moving. think you want people to be objective and to be able to tell you that this might not work, or maybe if they say something and you have a response for it, that's better than, having a yes person.
So are you saying that after the raise, you don't need advisors?
No, I was just saying that most people have they get the advisors in order to raise, but I think you do need advisors after the raise. That's something we can add to the list, right? Because you're still in the process of running a business, and maybe they can help you do some of the strategies and operational issues that you might have going forward.
So what happens if, let's say, I'm Tezo and I have some founders and I don't agree with the foundation anymore with what we're doing? What can we do in those instances?
So
tell us how you feel about foundations.
So I think I know foundations are created for charitable purposes. They are not created to hold on to cryptos and to do these funky, donations and things like that. I mean, granted, it could be also used for money laundering, but that's not what we are encouraging anyone to do. And so I think the emergence, but I haven't heard much about foundations recently, but the emergence of foundations coming out to hold this number of cryptos and then release them a little bit at a time and have it in escrow and things like that. I'm like, if you're trying to be a blockchain-based business and you're saying that, or you're using some sort of distributed ledger technology, if you're holding tokens or coins somewhere else, then it's not distributed. It's very, very, very much centralized. So that's my opinion about those. But if you have a foundation that doesn't agree with whatever you're trying to do, I think you should first look at if the foundation is even set up for charitable purposes, because maybe you don't even need that foundation.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked about a wide range of things.
Yes.
But we didn't really talk about any reporting requirements. And so you raise a bunch of money, you issued a security, or you have this token. Are there any reporting requirements that the issuers need to be aware of?
Well, so it depends on how you raise the funds, right? If you go via one of the SEC or Securities Act exemptions, then yes, you have annual reporting. But outside from that, you should be reporting to the people who invested, right? Or who bought some of your tokens. That's something else that I think has upset some of the people in the Telegram groups, right? They put their money in, the funds, the raise closes, and then they don't hear anything. And you might be working on it, but you're not keeping up with your crowd. And so because we call this crowdfunding on steroids, you got to keep up with your crowd. You have to be telling them what's going on. Even if that means whatever you started, you said it was going to be out in 30 days and turns out it's going to be 60 days, better to tell them that it's going to be out in 60 days than to not say anything at all and then drop it in 60 days. So I think being forthcoming with your crowd or with your supporters is very, very important.
Mm-hmm. So as we're about to wrap up, I'm looking at my notes. We talked about, for your first of its kind, unique snowflake of a project, you need customer and consumer education. You have to be okay with the haters. As Maureen says, leadership is so cool because of all the shade from your haters.
Okay.
You can't have advisors before and after the raise. They may actually swap. You can be ready for some therapy sessions for the pay scales and egos arguments that you might have with you and your founders.
Okay.
There's gonna
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
There's going to be technical issues that are going to arise, so prepare for those. If you
have a plan for when those tech issues arise.
Yes. And to borrow an old adage, don't put all your eggs in one basket. So if you raise a few $1 million or even a couple $100,000, please don't keep them all in the same wallet.
Yes,
that could be another issue. You might get a love letter from the SEC, and you might have some reporting requirements. And the last thing we want to touch on before we sign off is listings on an exchange.
Okay.
What have you heard about those, and how much does it cost?
So it depends, right? But as far as listing on an exchange, some exchanges, if you're going the traditional, we'll call it traditional ICO route, and you want to list your token or crypto on an exchange such as Bittrex or Binance or something like that, they will not list your coin if you consider it to be a security, right? So you can't use one of the exemptions, raise all that money, and then try to list that coin on another exemption on an exchange. And generally, they require you to obtain an opinion letter from an attorney that states that, based on their legal opinion, that your crypto is not a security. And so, but you have to be mindful that those letters don't mean that at some point later the SEC might not consider whatever you're offering to be a security. So that's something to keep in mind. And keep in mind that those letters are kind of expensive, right? Because there's an attorney writing this opinion on there.
How much are they?
In the thousands. So I think the lowest I've seen is about 15,000 and then up. And then the other thing I would say, last time we talked about STOs, so security token offerings. So essentially, you're admitting that what your token is a security, but you're still trying to raise that money via an exemption. And so those tokens at this point have not been listed on any exchanges yet, because technically if you have a security, there's a 1-year lockup period and you got to wait some time. There are some exchanges coming out. They're working on trying to be the exchange that you go to when it's time. So that's something to also keep a lookout out for.
Brilliant. Well, I believe we're at our time.
Yes.
And so my name's Samson Williams. I'm at Hustle Fun Baby on Instagram and Twitter. This is Maureen, who's...
I can say my name.
Uh-oh.
This is Maureen Murat. I am at Crowdy Advisors on Instagram and Twitter. And I also have a Crowdy Advisors Facebook page. And I'm on LinkedIn, Maureen L. Murat, M-U-R-A-T.
What are we going to do our next topic on?
That's a good question. Oh, you're doing the real estate one with Owen Sokoloff?
Oh, yes. So on July 22nd,
Blockchain and real estate. Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a conversation with Owen Sokoloff, the real love of my life. It's a good inside joke of talking about tokenizing real estate transactions. So join us for that. You'll see the Eventbrite information below. And I think that's it for today.
Yep, sounds good.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
See you guys
Have a
later.
good night.